Yeah. Oh, there we go. This Free Minds episode something
season 2.
Hey listeners, this Free Minds season 2 episode
12.
Oh god, on say dos. What's 12 in Spanish?
I told you I forgot after 10.
Oh god. All right, this episode is no longer in Spanglish. Sorry, listeners, that's no longer happening. Oh, and the video is going to catch up now.
And we're live.
We're live.
We're
and
live
in color.
We're live.
Yeah, we're here.
Great.
We're saying things. So how have things been going? Let's, I guess, mention my books for a second, just because we haven't done that for a hot minute. Yeah. And you can still purchase Evergreen. We're Not the Mask We Wear. We're the Light That Shines Through on Amazon or on my website, freeminds.life. The second book, Evergreen, The Unfolding of Love, is coming out probably in May and maybe June, but it's going to be around that time frame. It's what the editor's now putting the finishing touches on it. It'll be out soon. And then that third book's still up in the ether coming down. So that's out there too. The Alchemist Compass. So things are getting manifested. Just like we all manifested here today to do a little podcast episode. You got myself, Trey Jackson.
John's back.
Johnny Nichols. And
LaShawn
you can
McCrary.
introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm LaShawn.
Nice to meet you.
LaShawn
Nice
is
to meet
here.
you. I am here.
Usually we kind of like to jump into a video first just to kind of activate our emotional being a little bit.
Okay.
Because, when we go into a podcast, usually we're like, okay, we have to have this logical discussion and things are, left brain. But I've definitely found watching something like this kind of helps us get into the groove. So we'll watch this quick little video and then we'll kind of just jump into the discussion about, who you are, what you're doing, where you came from, how your book came to be, all the fun stuff.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
Wunderbar.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in the green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
A poem by Dylan Thomas. rage against the dying of the light. Can we hear things? Good. And for me, like we all have a light in us that wants to shine through in this life, and a lot of us dim it. A lot of us don't let it out. A lot of us keep it under wraps because we're scared of what would happen if we allowed ourselves to actually come out as who we are in this life, as allowed, all of our full potential to come, through. What would that be like? And I think it scares a lot of us. And it just like in that poem, it just talks about, I consider the good night, when our life is over. And I think saying, do not go gentle into that good night is saying, don't just come here and exist and be gone. Don't just come here to survive for a little bit and not really add to anything, not really, I think we all came here to do something, to learn some kind of lesson, and to do that requires us to be here and to be present in our life and actually take part in it, as opposed to just passively existing in it. And that's kind of what that meant to me. But what we do on this podcast is we talk about people finding that light that's in their hearts that one day it's just, they can't hide it any longer, and they have to let it come out. Mm-hmm. It's not an option to say no anymore. And usually there's a tipping point, but we can shut out that inner voice as long as we want, or we can let it out. And it feels so much better when you just start to let it out, when you just start to let who you really are come through. And it takes a lot of work, as we all know, in this journey. And I'm sure on your own journey, you've had some kind of experience like this to where you started to let yourself finally shine through. And that's why we had you on this podcast, is to kind of share that story of how you came from who you were into who you are now, and how this journey kind of came to be, especially into coming who you really truly are, into coming into yourself. I think that's really finding the self and letting it come out through whatever expression that best serves that need.
Well, what's really interesting about that is you mentioned that it's about learning the lessons, and although I agree with that wholeheartedly, but I think the really coming into your own is when you not only learn the lesson, but you're willing to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
Because none of us are alone. There's no single experience that, even though sometimes it feels like, am I the only one going through this? And, no one else knows what it feels like to have had this particular experience. But when we open up and we talk to other people and we find out, no, there are lots of people who have had this experience. And there are some people that are going through it right now. And they could use your knowledge, your wisdom to help them, go along on their path. And so that opening up and being free to just be who we are. And so many people, I think sometimes people think about it, but they don't really think that it's available for them. Like, right. Oprah can have it, and Deepak Chopra can have mm-hmm. it, and, Wayne Dyer had it, but they don't really realize that it's meant for all of us to have it. And we do have it, and that's, why I think it's so great, and why I love teaching so much. And, even recently writing and really accepting myself as an author, even listening to my own voice. It's interesting because for many years, my background actually started in television production, and that was what I went to school for. Originally, I was a film major. And the college that I was at got rid of the film department about 2 years before I was going to graduate. And I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And I was already like really fed up, tired of college. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to stay here and major in the closest thing to it, which ended up being a communications degree. So I went into television. But I was always kind of staring out of the window, thinking that I should be somewhere else and feeling as if I should be doing something different. And at the time, I honestly had no clue, what that was. And so there was really this unfolding in this period of just being unhappy. And then I found myself going from job to job, and I went back to school. And for a while, I thought I was going to be a web developer, and I was going to have this really great career. And I was just like, I hate sitting on the computer for hours and hours and hours. And I'm a people person. And why did I just spend, how many thousands of dollars did I just spend? You know, trying to redefine myself to figure out that I was going down the wrong path for the wrong reason. And, you know, I remember one day years later, it was an ex-boyfriend of mine at the time. And I remember him asking me, he said, LaShawn, you know, have you ever thought that maybe the problem is you? Because everywhere you go, you start off and you're good and you're excited. And then a couple months later, you hate it and you're having all these issues. And it was at that point where it was kind of like, And I was really upset when he first said it. Right. Like, you are so lucky we are on the phone, because I would like whack you right now if you were sitting in front of me. But then when I thought about it some more, it was like, wow, he's right. You know, and I realized that it is me. And so I need to figure out who I am. And so I just really began this path of just, you know, seeking who I was as an individual, and things just really unfolded over time. It wasn't an easy journey. I learned so many lessons along that path, and it was, now I can look back and say it was a great experience. But at the time, I cried a lot. Went in and out of depression, never to the point where I needed to be medicated, but I had some really dark nights, you know, some really scary moments in my life, because I just knew that I didn't want to die like that. You know, I didn't know, you know, and I still don't know, you know, when my last day is going to be, but I knew I couldn't spend the rest of my life feeling the way that I was feeling every day. You know, I remember at one point in time, there was one particular job I had, and I remember waking up every morning for about 3, maybe 4 months, and I wept. It was like the moment I opened my eyes, I just wept. And it was just like, I can't keep doing this, you know? And it was still years after, you know, that had even happened. I remember another job I had, and I was so fed up with being there. And I remember saying to myself as I was driving to work, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive through the parking lot. And if I do not easily find a parking spot, this is my day to leave. And so I pull in and I don't see any spots. And I get closer to the back of the parking lot and I still don't see any spots. And I turn the bend. And by this time I'm feeling like, oh yeah, this is it. And you know, and I'm coming, and right before it came time for me to pull out of the parking lot, there's this spot. And I'm like, no. And I mean, I literally sat in my car and I just screamed and I banged on my dashboard, and it was just like, okay. Yeah. You have bills to pay. You're going to suck it up for another day. Yeah. And, you know, and I went back into work, and, you know, and at the time it actually still did kind of make sense, because I still didn't know what I wanted. I still didn't know in which direction I was going. So, you know, at that time, it kind of made sense to just get out of the car and go in the building. And it was just like, but this is that day where nobody says anything to me, or it's, or it's going down in a bad way.
I like that you share it like that, though, in terms of like, people feel like when they wake up every morning and they're crying that it's never going to change. Yeah. And they're not alone, because like, I've done it. You've done it. Lots of people have done it before we make this shift and transition to something different, which we'll get to. Right. It takes a long time. Yeah, it does. And as much as we wish it was like an overnight process, it isn't. And I promise all of you, I tried to make it an overnight process. I tried to make it as quick as possible. But that just wasn't a part of my journey, you know, for whatever reasons that is, which are still unfolding. But I also realized that, thinking back on it now, I wasn't mature enough to handle the responsibility of my gifts. I wasn't mature enough to handle realizing that when you teach, that you are also partially responsible, not for the person accepting the lesson, but making sure that you do your best to present the lesson and actually live the lesson. You know, it's one thing to say something, and people can preach anything, you know, that happens all the time. But we also see a lot of people losing their credibility when they don't live up to the lesson that they're teaching. And I think that happens a lot these days
Oh,
in terms
yeah.
of people preaching love and light or whatever it is, and then like also having their own personal issues, and then they feel this disconnect between what they're saying and what they're doing.
Yes.
And there's just this inauthentic gap.
Yeah. And and it doesn't even mean that we have to be perfect either, because I think a lot of people mean that. But to just admit that, even though I'm a life coach and I'm an author, and I'm an intuitive reader and I have all these great gifts, some days I miss the mark. Some days I try to sit down and meditate and I can't get into that space. Some days I'm frustrated. Some days I'm angry. Some days I feel hurt. And that's a part of the process too, because within that we get more clarity. And I know, okay, I don't want to feel like this. So what do I know? What would I teach a client of mine? What would I say to them if they said they were going through the exact same thing that I'm going through? What would I say to them to help them get out of this rut? Okay, so now I'm going to say it to myself, and I'm going to pull myself out of this rut. And then sometimes it's having the wisdom to know I need to call another one of my friends that's a coach, or, whoever it is that I know can say something to me to help me shift my mood so that I can, shift my thinking first, because it always starts with our thinking, right? And then, and then eventually you feel better. But, we have to consistently have that desire to want to move, to want to be a better person, to want to feel better. Because, let's admit it, sometimes we want to have a pity party.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, because I've thrown some of the best pity parties ever. Great food, there were drinks and balloons and the whole thing. But it's just like,
you get
who
stuck
wants to
in
come
it.
to that party? And you realize, okay, it's just me down here. So I'm going to let this go so I can move on.
It's so spot on, though, especially like the pity party stuff, because
Yeah.
when we're having a bad day, we want it to be a bad day. We want everything to go wrong, so then we can keep saying, see, it's never going to change.
It's never going to change.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like somebody gave me an awful sounding analogy, but it's like when you're like sitting around in shit and you just get used to the smell and it smells good after a while.
Oh, wow. That's
First
bad.
time I've heard that one.
That's
Wow.
bad.
But it's kind of true though, because like nobody wants to be in that stuck, like I can't move. Like
Right.
we don't really want to be there, and yet we're there. And since we're there, we get like stubborn about it or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can definitely happen. And, for some people that can last months, some people even years, but the great news is at any time that we decide that we want to break that cycle, we can. And that's the great thing. So even if you've been stuck in the pattern, let's say 5, 10, maybe even more years, if you decide right now, you know what, I want to break this pattern, and just that determination alone gives you the power to turn in another direction. And it doesn't take you another 5 years to self-correct. I mean, many times it really can be in a moment.
Right.
In a moment, everything can catch up with it. And that's what I love just about, oh my gosh, just the universe and just how everything just works out, just all of it, just all of it.
Can you talk about that moment that you finally realized, hey, this is it, and I'm going to quit my job?
I actually had several of those.
Well, hey, that's important.
A lot of them were just, I'm tired of this place and I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm not being treated right. I'm gone. And I'm that person that will just leave and go, what did I just do? Okay. But what I found is that I was making a lot of just pretty much horizontal moves, not lateral. That's a hard question to answer because I had so many different breaking moments, but I do remember, and you guys will love this. So I'm working in this one office that I absolutely can't stand, and I have no business in corporate America, not whatsoever, but I'm there and I'm working. And there was this group of ladies that I worked with, and I really, some of them I liked it, but there were a couple of them that I just really couldn't stand. Well, as a Christmas gift, they bought me a gift certificate to, I believe it was, what was the name of the bookstore that closed down? It was a really large chain.
Barnes & Noble?
Not
or
Barnes & Noble.
Brooks, not Brooks.
I can't think of the name of it. But whatever that bookstore is, and that's why it's gone, because nobody can remember who they are. But I got a gift certificate from them.
Borders.
Borders.
Oh,
Thank you.
there you
Thank
go.
you.
That
There
was
you
an
go.
intuitive hit.
Yeah. John gets the points for that one.
There you go.
And I remember getting this gift certificate from them. And one day I came home from work and I was just furious. And I remember thinking, I need something to uplift me. And so I'm flipping through the stations, and I happen to come across this television station, TBN. And there was this guy on there promoting his book, and I was like, I don't want to hear about this guy and his book. And so I go and I keep flipping through stations. And then I hear, in my spirit, as loud and as clear as ever, turn back. And I'm complaining. I'm like, whatever. I don't even want to hear this guy. But I flipped back through. And this guy, the name of his book was titled 48 Days to the Work You Love. And I'm like, what? And so now I'm like all eyes and ears, he has my full attention. He's talking about his book, and, there was an immediate call to action for me. I almost got up and went to the bookstore, but I realized they had already closed. And so the very next day I got up, and that was my first stop, to go to the bookstore. And I mean, I dove into that book because I was like, I'm going to kill somebody in 48 days. I was like, I don't have 48 days. I need to get out of here like now. And he's like, yeah, take your time, do the exercises. I'm like, yeah, I'm taking my exercises, but I am not taking my time. I am like plowing through this book. And it was through the reading of that book that I realized, and his name is Dan Miller. So Dan Miller, thank you. But I remember, reading through this book, and I began to relate to myself through some of the things and some of the questions that he asked. And I realized that I wanted to go into public speaking. And it was just like, wow. So it's just like, okay, this is really great. And I found a Toastmasters group that was near me, and, and I joined this group, and everything was really great. By this time, I was at yet another job because I left the one where I was at, and this one was no better. I'm pretty much so I'm recreating this experience, right? At every job that I go to. Oh yeah. Just another fiasco waiting to happen. And I had another kind of like an aha awakening moment when I went to my doctor, just a routine doctor's visit, and my blood pressure was like 150 over 100, like really high. And he's looking at me. He's like, but you look very healthy. And he's like, we're going to do some blood work. They ran the blood work. A few days later, the nurse calls me back. She said, oh my gosh, there are people that would kill to have these numbers. Your numbers across the board are perfect. I mean, everything. So I'm like, okay. The doctor called me back in the office, and he's like, okay, I'm looking at this. And he said, so there is nothing in your blood work. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you, which tells me that there's something on the outside. There is something that is bothering you. And you have 30 days to get rid of whoever or whatever is bringing this much stress into your life. And he said, technically, I should not let you out of here with these numbers this high. I should be admitting you into the hospital. But it is something outside of you, and you have 30 days to figure it out, or I'm going to medicate you, whatever. And, me always being like, nope, I'm against big pharma, all the medicines, it's just like, no, I'm not doing that. And I knew at that time that it was meant for me to move forward. And so my next step in this long process of my life was realizing that I did, I wanted to go forward. And there was a young lady that called me, and there was a program called Fred Pryor. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but they're a national training company. Okay. And they were looking for speakers, and, they were holding auditions. And there was a woman that called me, and she said, hey, I know you had thought about doing this before. Why don't we go together? She said, we'll split the cost of, rent a car, hotel room, everything. And I'm like, okay, great. You know what? I'm going to do it because I got to get out of this place. Well, we get closer to the time to leave to go out for our certification. I'm calling and I'm calling. She's not answering my phone calls. And then finally, about 2 weeks out, I get a call from her, and she tells me, oh, something else came up. I can't go. And I'm like, oh, really? And I decided, you know what? I'm going to do this anyway. And so I got the time off from my job. I, went to certification and everything. I really loved it. Everything felt right. And, at the time they told me, because this was in October, and I remember saying that I wanted for my birthday to be able to put in my 2 weeks notice, or to just quit, whatever.
It's a good birthday. It's a good birthday present.
And yeah, exactly. And I remember them saying, well, right now, this time of the year, it's pretty slow. So you probably really won't get any gigs until January. So I'm kind of disappointed, but I'm just like, okay, whatever. I go to work, and I remember talking to my aunt on the phone, and she said, LaShawn, it's not going to be that long. You're going to get a phone call. And I'm just like, okay. Hung up. An hour later, I get a phone call. Hey, in a week and a half, we need you to go out and do a seminar. Can you do it? And I'm like, yep, I'm out of here. And the very next day, I turned in my resignation, and it was just a great moment. And everybody in the office, and I remember I said to my manager, I said, hey, when you get a second, I have something I need to share with you. And she was just like, well, is it good news? And I was like, for me, it is. And I literally said that. And my coworkers, which I had already shared it with because we were pretty close, they just cracked up. And so, that was literally, how that happened. And so it was just like little things like that just happened that just kind of pushed me on my course. And it was interesting because I was supposed to originally do follow another speaker out on the road a couple of times because I had never seen a seminar before. But I knew it was meant for me to do them. And, just because of the time constraints, I actually ended up going out there on my own, doing it, and had never seen one, had never attended one. But yeah, and I did it. And it was great because from the very first seminar that I did, which was a very small seminar, but they were asking me, hey, are you going to this location? There are people in my office. I want them to hear you. And so I just knew.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a couple things. Like the first thing, it seems like if we want to change, we can't like stay at where we are and like try to change at night. Like it seems like we have to make this shift and like change the environment because the environment determines our body chemistry, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And and I do have to say this as well, though, because sometimes we are in a situation, and one of my favorite quotes, I love it and I dislike it at the same time, is by Wayne Dyer. And it's when he says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I remember the first time I read that, and I was just like, threw the book across the room, like, wait, are you making me accountable, for what I'm seeing and how I'm feeling? So, we have to remember that as well. And I think a lot of times, because after I came back from training, my whole attitude, about that place, it shifted. It was just like, it is what it is. And I don't care because I'm going to be leaving here soon. Yeah. And because of that, I wasn't angry and I wasn't frustrated. It was just like, this is just this place. Yeah. And I just knew I was done with it. And it was amazing how, and I believe that it was because of that shift that I had within me first. That's what really got me out of the environment, not leaving the environment and then having the shift, but actually shifting while you're in the environment. And I know that's hard. It is so difficult, and the more you dislike the situation and the more uncomfortable it is, the harder that is to do. And unfortunately, that's the way it works. And I'm trying to create a pill where maybe that could change, but it doesn't work that way. Yeah. So, yeah.
Create a pill so we can see the Matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cat.
That's a cat.
Yeah, I totally agree. The perspective is really important because when I was in my job too, at my old job, I was like, this is miserable. I hate it. And yet, like, I still find myself actually taking some of the stuff I learned there and applying it in what I'm doing now. So it's not like it's all for naught. And I think a lot of the time people have the thought of, I've spent so much time and effort into this thing that I've been doing. Even though I hate it, I've spent like 5 or 6 years here, whatever it is, and I'm just going to give all that up. And it seems like we don't give all of it up, right? You probably took a lot with you.
Oh,
and reutilized it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I used to work in television production. And so basically, whenever you watch the news, I was a director. So I was a person behind the scenes. Every time you see a video, a camera shot, words scrolling across the bottom, I was a person who orchestrated all of that. And it was fun and it was exciting during the newscast. But there was so much politics around it. And I can't stand politics. And, just the whole mentality where they're literally looking for, is there a fire? Did anybody get killed? And I'm like, really? Is this where we are as a society? And that's what drives their ratings, unfortunately. So the environment really wasn't for me, but the skills that I learned there, that's why I'm comfortable getting in front of a microphone. I understand audio checks and a lot of things about video because I'm doing a video series now myself. And, so a lot of that. And one of my closest friends to this day, I met her at that place. So if nothing else, I came out with her and, our spiritual journeys really unfolded together. So, I needed her, I needed to work there. So if for no other reason to meet her, because she is, so important to my life. And, whenever I'm feeling, down and I need a pick me up, I know that I can always call her and she's just like, hey girl, get it together. You're doing this, So it's great. It's really great.
So how did you shift into becoming an author and life coach?
You know, at one point in time, because I'm also an ordained minister, and I spent a lot of time, started off in my early 20s of really following my heart and seeing where that path led. And so I went into traditional Christianity, and, you know, that was great. And I learned a lot, had a lot of bumps and bruises along in that journey as well. And it was just a lot of unfolding of myself. And I began feeling, you know, inside myself that there were certain things that I needed to write. And coming through the job where I told you where I went to Fred Pryor and I started the speaking, I began to realize that every time I was there, I was becoming the expert. And even though, well, I don't want to give away any of the company secrets because it's a great company, but, you know, it was one of those things where people just began to come to me. And I was really getting sought out. And I realized that that had been happening to me throughout the course of my life, and that I had always wanted to help people be healthy and be happy. I mean, even since I was a little girl, that was always very important to me. So, you know, as I'm going through and I'm learning all this, my spirituality just began to grow. And I began to ask a lot of questions that typically in Christianity, it's just like, well, we don't know the answers and don't ask that question. But I still had more questions. And there were things, and it just, I got to a point where I was like, there's more to God than this. Mm-hmm. There's more to God than what you're saying. There's more to us. And knowing that, you know, even though they'll say very quickly, oh, you know, we're made in the image and likeness of God and we're spiritual beings, but we never look at our spiritual part. We never look at our spiritual body. Mm-hmm. And that was just something that I was no longer willing to turn a blind eye to. Right. And so I began to explore and I began to look around. And as I was doing that, just different writings, because this is actually my third book that I've written. The first one is titled Woman Within, Loving, Accepting, and Empowering Your Authentic Self. And that book was really, really hard for me to write. Some parts were easy. Yeah. But I ended up finishing the book because my dad said, oh, you quit a lot of things you don't finish. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll show you, Dad. And so I finished the book. So thank you, Dad. But you know, it was one of those things. My second book was All Is Well. And it was just basically a compilation of different quotes that are very inspirational. But this book, I Am Not an Option, that was really a turning point and a shifting point for me. And I ended up writing this book because I was driving around, and I'll never forget it. It was a nice, like, late summer, early fall day. And I was riding around with a guy who was at that time my boyfriend. And he shared with me that there were some women that he had dated, and they called him and they wanted to know, well, why her? And I was like, well, what do you mean, why her? Like, you know, what's that mean? And what they meant by that was he had always said he didn't want a relationship. And, you know, if you were fine with, you know, just doing whatever, that, you know, okay, you know. And the women agreed to that. And it really baffled me because he said, you know, you're the first woman in several years that's actually come out and said, I need to be in a relationship and it has to go someplace. And I was just like, really? And that, I mean, when I tell you that my chakras literally collided, and I just felt my soul rise up, and I said to myself, we're not doing this anymore. And the very next day I sat down and I began to write. And it was effortless. I mean, the words just came out of me. And it was interesting because another friend of mine was trying to get me to write a book on relationships because he said, you have such a good understanding of men, you know, you should share that with women. And I was just like, nah. And I just really wasn't, you know, I didn't feel like doing that. But when this happened, it was more about women taking back their power and deciding that they were going to be honest, that they were going to walk in their truth, that they were going to speak their truth, that they were just going to really be free to be themselves. And I saw where the dating scene, especially here in the Atlanta area, where it had just become so bleak. And I said, you know what? But this doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't make any sense for you to not only lie to other people, but to lie to yourself. Because every time a woman says to a man, I don't want a relationship. No, I don't need to be married. No, we can just be friends with benefits. And you know that's not your truth. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, we're not doing this anymore. You know, and I meant it. And so for 4 months, I just wrote, and everything that came out. And when I could write for 2 hours, 2 days, 5 minutes. But if I sat down to write, words flowed every single time. I didn't get writer's block. I didn't need to pray or meditate first. I didn't need to watch any inspirational videos. I mean, any of the stuff that I had to force myself to do in the past, not with this book. And so it literally just came through me.
Yeah, and we'll get to the content of the book in a little bit, but I kind of want to talk about how it was coming through. It's like when you find like that purpose that like is your soul purpose. Your soul came here to express something. You went through all of this stuff in your life to come up to this point so that you could express it through this conduit, through this vessel that you are as a person in that moment, and let the universal energy flow through you, go through that filter, and it comes out. Like the book has always been waiting to come out. It's always been like kind of there.
Right.
It just needed the conduit to come through because the message needed to be expressed. It just needed a vessel, a person, somebody, you know, to say it.
Yeah.
You know, and it sounds like when you don't get that writer's block, it means like your soul's just like, was it like you were listening to the words and you're writing down to keep up with them kind of sometimes? You know,
no, it just felt like it was pouring out of my heart. And it was like my fingers knew what my heart wanted to say. And I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes so much sense.
But yeah, and that's what it was. And, you know, and so it just kind of came out. Yeah, I mean, it really did. And I was so excited because I always knew that I was supposed to be writing. But every time I tried to write something, it just didn't feel right. You know, and like I said, and I was always getting online and reading, you know, how to get yourself focused to write and, you know, come up with chapter titles and do this and do that. And none of that stuff worked for me. And I'm just like, yeah, you know, and, you know, and I began, you know, and I grew very frustrated, you know, even considering hiring a ghostwriter because I feel that I'm better with the spoken word than I am with the written word, you know, or at least I did until I wrote the book. And I was like, hey, I'm great at both, you know, you know, and it was just kind of that thing. But I mean, literally, my friend Michelle that I was telling you about that I met working in television, and you know, she and I were on the phone many times, and she's like, well, LaShawn, what do you want to do? Do you want to get a voice dictation thing? Will that help you? You know, what's going to help you write? And again, for years I just didn't know. And then once this happened, I was like, okay, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is what they say when you get in your zone and it's just natural to you and it just flows. And I was like, okay, I get it now. And it was like the greatest feeling ever. Feeling ever.
Do you think there's a way to like carry that in the zoneness into like the rest of our life? Because it's just it is so effortless when it comes through like that. And I guess all of life isn't supposed to be effortless, but like when we're doing what we love, it is kind of.
You know,
kind of.
Yeah, I think that it is. You know, I really do. Like doing this interview right now, this is very comfortable for me. This just flows for me. And I believe that when you know what your gifts are and you just allow yourself to flow and not try to be perfect and don't compare yourself to anyone else, it just comes out. You know, and you just allow. And for a lot of people, that's hard, you know, because we're taught. I mean, and look at all the different stuff that's out there about if you want to be a success, you have to do A, B, C, D, and it has to be in this order, and you have to do it at this time, and it has to look like this. And so there are all these rules and guidelines, but I kept finding that wasn't my mold. Yeah. I didn't fit into any of those guidelines, those tips and tricks. And I'm not saying that they don't work for some people because clearly they do. But I found out that that's not what was for me. And so I think a lot of this journey is figuring out what works for us, you know, what works for Trey, what works for John, what works for LaShawn. And we may all have a similar path, but how we get on our path is completely different. And embrace that and say, hey, you know what? You did it your way, Trey, and that's great. You still got your book out there, you know, and that's all that matters, you know, and whatever you're working on, John. Are you working on a book?
No, I'm not working on a book.
You should be. Okay. So just so you know.
She's an intuitive.
I'll take it.
You know, and so your path to writing your book is going to be your path. My path was my path, but I embrace all of our paths. You know, and it's not, no, Trey should have did it this way. He should have listened to me. No, he should listen to himself. Yeah. You know, and that's part of the problem. We spend so much time listening to other people tell us how it should be done when deep down inside, that's our voice. That's our knowing of how something should be done and when something should be done, you know, and just roll with the punches and learn whatever our lesson is to be learned.
The thing that like it came to you when you were in the car in that moment, like, and you just knew, And your whole life, you've been trying to force this thing. You've been trying to make it happen.
Right.
And a lot of people that come to me in my readings just ask me, how am I going to know what my message is? How am I going to know what my purpose is? How am I going to know how to do it and when to do it? And we get so focused on that we're not even really in the present moment. And I'm sure that happened to you when you were fully in the present moment. Almost, kind of.
You know what was interesting was I knew I would write other books, but I had no intentions of writing a book at that time.
Okay.
So I wasn't looking for it. It just showed up. And so a lot of our journey is trust and trusting that everything is going to show up. But when it does, moving on it. Because a lot of times people will get it and then they come up with every reason why they can't. Well, I don't have time. I don't have money. And money is a big stopper to why we can't do something, but you use what you have. I had an older MacBook that, oh my gosh, I just got rid of that thing and it's great. But, you use what you have. And here's the great thing, if source, God, the universe, whatever you call it, if that love gives you the idea to do it, the measures to make it happen are also going to show up, but you have to begin to work in it. You have to show that you trust it. And so that's what I did, when the words were coming to me. And once I made that decision, it was just like the book was done before I'd ever typed a word on page.
Wow.
It was already done because in me, it was just like, this is a done deal. But most people don't do that. It's kind of like, well, maybe I will. And yeah, I know this is my gift, but and they go through all that. And so when you get caught up, kind of like in that catch-22, you can stay there for quite a while. But with this book, it was so different. And I am so glad that I had that experience because now I can tell other people what that looks like, what that feels like, and to just go for it. Because if you stop and think, you're going to talk yourself out of it, right? Because unfortunately, that's what we do.
Yeah.
That's why there's 1% of the population that's super, super successful. And I'm not talking about the people that are just that come from money, but the people that have actually created their success. That's the thing that stops the rest, the other 99% from being just like that percent. Why? Because they kept going. They had it in their hearts and they kept going. And, when stuff comes up and obstacles come, because they do and they will and they're going to continue to, they figured out a way around it, so that you really just have to be determined to make it happen. And it was interesting because I remember when I was talking to the woman that I call my spiritual guru, and thank you, Source, for sending her to me. I remember her saying to me that what happened was you caught up to the speed and the essence of who you are. And so it was able to move like lightning speed. And I was like, oh, because before it was kind of like I was looking for me and searching for me and chasing me. And it was just like at that time, the feeling and everything was just right. It was just really one of those divine moments. It truly was.
Yeah. And that's awesome. And that's like the exact answer that people will hear that or they won't hear it,
Yeah. Right.
But it makes so much sense and you're building kind of a relationship with that trust, with your higher self, whatever you want to call it. It is a relationship.
Yeah, it is a relationship. Absolutely. And trust is just the overall word. You have to trust it, and you have to believe that it can happen. And like I said, because I knew and I had always known that I would be writing many more books. So when it happened, it was just like, okay, I've done this before, and even if you haven't done it before, somebody, at some point in time, you have to do it for the first time. Nobody gets good at anything, overnight. Basketball players, they shoot thousands of times, before they become really, really good and hone their craft. Singers, they sing a lot, so with whatever profession it is that you're in, you just have to get in the game. Yeah. You just have to show up and get in the game and not, oh, I hope I'm going to play. No, I'm going to play and I'm going to play a really, really great game. And you just go all out.
Yeah. And like, I think we've talked about, like, I don't even think you have to be spiritual to make your dreams happen. Like, Steve Jobs or Kobe Bryant, whoever it is, like they just knew and they didn't have to say, well, I'm connecting to my higher self. Like, not that that's stupid. Everybody does it their own way.
Right.
But I think it makes it more powerful when you just trust yourself, because the relationship you're building is really with yourself.
Absolutely. And here's the funny thing, though. It's spiritual for everybody. It's just different terminology.
Right.
That's really all it is. It's just different terminology. So it's just like you said, Steve Jobs, Kobe Bryant, they're doing, and I don't know what their spiritual practices are, or maybe they don't have any. But whatever it is, it's still determination. It's still, having a vision and believing in that vision and going for it. Until it happens. And a lot of people stop because unfortunately it doesn't always show up quickly, and I am the first person to be guilty of being very impatient, my mother could have named me impatient, because for much of my life I've been impatient. And now I finally have gotten to a point where it's just like, okay, you know what? You got to let go. You got to let go, because trying to force things and make things, just doesn't work. And so allowing myself to go with the flow, believing and, staying, consistent, because that's another thing that a lot of times when things don't happen, we stop doing the things, that we need to be doing. And I get that, we feel down, we feel sad, and, and especially if you look around and you see somebody else is excelling and you think, wow, I should be there, or, because there's nothing that pains me more is when I see someone and I'm like, okay, they're cool, but yeah, and again, but the thing is, they're doing it. They're doing it. So it's just like, there's nothing that can be said, about something like that. So it's like, wow, so they're getting theirs, but it's up to me to get mine, and it's up to each of us individually, So yeah, connecting, like you said, Trey, connecting within yourself, it is the same thing as connecting with God. Yeah.
And we can define spirituality however we want, but I think
however we want. Yeah.
So when this book idea came to you, I think you said you heard about these other women that basically were just succumbing to not who they really are. And it felt like it lit a fire in you a little bit, because you knew what to do and you have a platform to deliver a message. And so you did it because it's empowering yourself, but it also seems like you're empowering a lot of other people with this.
Yeah, it was that. And it was like, it reignited a fire that was just like really, really dim. And it was kind of like they just threw like lighter fluid and extra coal in, and then all of a sudden it just emerged. And I realized that it's meant for me to be the voice for women. It's meant for me to help women, what I call get themselves back. Because women, so often they lose themselves in relationships. They lose themselves to their kids. Even when a woman gets married, for example, I'm getting married in about a month or so,
Congrats.
And so thank you. And so even, if someone's to say, oh, so are you Mrs. Lindbergh Redmond? No, yes, but I'm also Mrs. LaShawn Redmond, because my identity in that, Mrs. denotes wife, and then it's his name, his first name, and his last name. Well, where is she in all of that? And so over time, it's just like, okay, respecting and honoring my marriage while I honor and respect myself. And so, this whole thing is, really about women tapping into their higher selves, because when you really love yourself and you know who you are, you don't feel a need to lie to anyone, and you're okay with saying, hey, this is what I desire. And if that man is not okay with it, recognizing he's not for you, and let him go, and don't try to, connive and lie and do things to keep somebody in your presence when really he shouldn't be there anyway. Because if you just simply saying, hey, and I didn't say to him, yeah, and you have to marry me, or it has to be us. It was simply, here's a certain time frame and I need to be married within that time, or I have to move on. But I'm not going to be a lifetime girlfriend. That's not for me. And if you're a woman and you're saying that's for you, make sure that that's really what you want. And if that's really what you want, fine. But don't do it because, well, guys don't really want to get married these days, or they run if I even bring up the subject. Well, then you're bringing up the subject either at the wrong time, or you're bringing up the subject with the wrong guy. And if he's going to leave, let him go. Let him go. He's doing you a favor, and so, just all of that in a nutshell. But, as a woman, we have to get to a point where we love and we accept ourselves enough to sometimes be alone. Yeah. And be okay with being alone. And I know for a lot of people that's scary, because we don't like to be alone. And the older you get, the harder it seems like that becomes. But it's just like we still owe it to ourselves to be honest with what we want and not just accept things, And I remember talking to my fiance about that. And I said, see, because I remember when he read through the book, he's like, well, doesn't everybody already know this? He's just like, I think, and I said, well, no, I said, because think about it. It's the women that you were dating. Apparently they didn't know this. And that's why they said those things, but he's not the only guy that's getting this. It's happening a lot. And so, it's for everybody to really just be accountable for the decisions that they're making in their lives and in their relationships.
I was going to say, do you have a lot of men that read it?
I have had some men that have read it, and they have loved it. They have been of different nationalities. Most of them have been over the age of 50, and I have gotten really great feedback. One of them had even said, I wish I had read this 20 years ago. This would have helped me out a lot had I read this book earlier, in my life. And I wasn't expecting that, even though I had set an intention for the book when I was writing it, that I wanted it to impact the lives of the planet. And I literally meant every breathing man, woman, and child, regardless of religion, regardless of where they're located. I wanted it to touch everyone. But I wasn't expecting men to actually pick it up, and read it. And I was just like, and really, enjoy reading it. So I was just like, oh, wow, this is really great. So I'm enjoying that. And I love that about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been reading it, and like it makes sense to me. I'm just like, oh, I never had this perspective before. I never we get so caught up in our own perspective that we forget that's there. And I haven't gotten too deep into it, but I am curious, I guess if you could give an overview of what it is, the book, and how to use it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I'll start talking, and if you need more clarification, let me know. So the title of the book, I Am Not an Option. And it took me a while. The title was actually the hardest thing for me to come up with, because I wasn't really sure, what I wanted it to be like. And I literally just sat down with a piece of paper one day, and I just started writing out, what did I want them to feel and what did I want them to think? And it came down to, I wanted them to make the decision that they were no longer an option. That to just be treated any kind of way, that our minds are not an option, our hearts, our bodies, our souls are not an option. And I was like, oh, I love that. And it was one of those things where, once again, I felt it, I just felt it resonate, through me. And so going through the chapters, one of the things that I always say about a book is, sometimes they're meant to be read from cover to cover, and sometimes you're just seeking certain things. And so use the book as you want to, as a guide. Go through it, see what resonates with you, because there may be one part in a relationship that you're really, really stuck on. And so go to that chapter, and read that chapter. And I have what are called reflection lessons at the end of the majority of the chapters. And those are for you to really go through. One of the things that my editor said was, we need to put all of your wisdom and your knowledge in this book. And she said, so let's not just talk about it. I want you to help them heal. And so create lessons, talk to them like they're your clients, and create lessons for them so that they can actually get through whatever relationship problems that they're having. And also so that they can find themselves, within this. And I was just like, okay, that sounds great. And so I went through and I created all of these different lessons, because one of the things that I was hearing from a lot of the guys that I had interviewed for the book was that women don't know what they want. And I was just like, really, and I had even tested it out and everything else. And I found that, they were right. They were talking in general, very general, broad terms, but it was just like, but what do you want specifically? And so there are activities in there that, help them hone in on that. What do you want? What do you like? For me, for example, if you want to take me out to dinner, I'm so easy. I love Chinese, Italian, Thai, Mexican food is my favorite, so it's really easy. But by me knowing myself, it's easier for me to convey that information to the man that I love. So now he knows what I like, because I'll hear a lot of people say, oh, well, he doesn't get me, or he doesn't understand me, and he doesn't know me. It's just like, well, did you tell him?
Sounds simple, right?
Yeah. It's just like, did you expect him to read your mind? It's just like, tell him, if it's important for you to have Sunday dinner with your family, tell him. If it's important for you to walk through the park and hold hands, you need to share that information and not get upset because, well, we walked through the park, but he didn't hold my hands. Well, did you let him know how important that was to you?
Is that like a is it like being scared to step on somebody's toes because they might leave and then being passive aggressive about it? Like where does that stem from? Like not wanting to share that honesty.
Yeah.
For some women it's that, for other women it's just that, well, he's been around me enough so he should know. And my thing is, and I always go back to this, well, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? Do you want to be happy or do you want to be, he should just figure me out? Which one is easier? And I have found that it's just easier to simply tell somebody what you like, what you dislike, what makes you laugh, what will upset you, knowing what your deal breakers are, because everybody has them, so if, smoking crack is, a deal breaker, then, then that's pretty easy, and I don't like that ecstasy stuff either, so, it's pretty cut and dry. But we have to be willing to communicate. And that's what a lot of people don't do in their relationships. They don't communicate. And they also, and I'm glad you picked up on this word, Trey, from the book, is perspective. Because it's all about understanding the other gender's perspective, whether you like it or not. You're not always going to like it, but do you at least understand it? And if you can just get yourself to a point where you understand it and go, okay, that's just one of those things where it's just a guy thing. Okay. And let it go and not take it personally, and so a lot of the stuff, were things that I did myself. In the book, I share about 3 previous relationships and the mistakes that I made within those relationships and the lessons that I learned from making those mistakes in relationships. And I felt that was very important. And I must say this, at first, I didn't want to write that part. And it was funny because as I'm typing and it's coming out and I was like, oh, yeah, no. Oh, I shouldn't write this. Oh, why am I writing this? And it's just steady coming. And I was like, okay, I'm going to surrender to this, but this sucks. Oh, I don't want to tell anybody about, oh man, that one really, ooh, and so I put, and I had titled those chapters, My Dirty Laundry. Because that's what it was, and so, but I was willing to, a little reluctantly, a little bit at first, but I was willing to share those things because I realized I'm not the only person that's done this.
Right.
I can't possibly be the only person on the face of this planet, however many billions of people there are here. I can't be the only one that's done this. So I'm going to own the fact that I did this, but I'm also going to look at the lessons that I learned from it. And so at the end of those particular chapters, I talk about what I learned about myself as I went through those relationships, and that's something that most people don't do. They come out of a relationship and they can tell you from A to Z everything that, that their ex did wrong and all of their issues and their problems. And my thing is always, well, what did you do? What? What did you do? You didn't do anything wrong. That you're just this perfect person. And, and most people don't want to look at themselves. And that's one of the things that this book also helps them do is look at yourself. I can't be mad at a guy if I go out on the weekend and I hook up with some random guy and then he doesn't call me the next day. Oh, all men are dogs. Well, come on. Now let's stop, ladies. What do men think of women that hook up with them that quickly and that easily? Housewife?
Who's going to say it?
Nah, it's just like, that, he doesn't want to marry you. He doesn't want to have your children. Even if he wants to get married and have children,
it's true.
You have officially crossed yourself off that list, and so many of the things, that women allow. And I have to say that because men follow suit. And a lot of women don't realize that if a guy likes you, he will follow suit. You don't even have to do that. And so all of that, just being really easy and, well, if I don't give it to him, then somebody else will. Right. Then let somebody else do it and let somebody else be angry and mad because now he's not calling her back, and so it's really about women being accountable, and not just saying, sure, we can be friends with benefits when that doesn't work for you. When that once you become intimate with a guy, you get close to him, you want something more, and that hoping that, oh, he's going to change his mind because, hey, here's a red alert. Guess what? If a guy likes you and you're fun to hang out with, he will treat you like you're his girlfriend when you're with him. But when you're gone, you're gone.
Yeah.
Out of sight, out of mind. And a lot of women don't know this. So it's just like, okay, let me tell them. and let me help them at the same time. Because while I'm saying all this, I'm saying it in love, kind of jokingly, okay, to kind of ease the mood, but also realizing that I love them and I want them to do better and they deserve better. And so I want to point it out. I want to be the person that said, if you don't know that you are worthy of much more, then let me tell you. If nobody has told you, that you deserve to be treated with respect, let me tell you. And take it from me, because you do deserve those things. And so I'm willing to stand before them and say, hey, I've made a lot of these mistakes that you've made. Here's how I've corrected them for myself. Here's how I can help you correct them for yourself. And now let's make this journey. Let's go ahead and turn our backs off that and stop doing things that don't serve us and begin to do all the things that do serve us, because it is possible.
Yeah. The accountability and asking yourself, what did I do wrong? I've been doing that a lot more. I'm actually making it a habit now in like the past year, just asking myself, like whenever something goes wrong, it's like first question I ask is, what did I do wrong?
Right.
And I feel like it's made life so much easier.
Yeah.
Because I'm not ashamed of making a mistake anymore. Mm-hmm. I'll be the first one in the room to say at work, oh, I messed that up. Sorry, my bad. And I learned from it. And I'm going to move on.
Right.
It just makes life so much easier rather than having to cover up stuff and blame someone else. It's like
it's so much easier to just blame someone else and like not accept the accountability. And
but once you continue to work on it and look at yourself first, it becomes easier.
Yeah, it does. But you have to first get to that point where you realize that blaming somebody else is not solving the situation, and that's really difficult for people to do, because really, what I'm asking women to do in this book is take a look at themselves. It's to take a really good, long, hard look at themselves and what they have permitted. Unless a guy has pulled you to the side at gunpoint and made you do all these things, you volunteered over and over and over again. And a lot of women get really angry with me when I say that, but that's actually what you've done. Now, you may not have done that intentionally, and you didn't realize the ramifications that would come from it, but nonetheless, that's what happened. And even still, it's okay. Now it's time to forgive yourself. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. That's sometimes they can forgive other people, but forgiving yourselves, because we feel like, I was so stupid. I should have left that relationship years ago. Okay, well, let's let that go, because you're gone now. So let's move forward, and I've said that to myself, and I've gotten myself, and it's funny because my fiance has actually heard me saying this. I'll be doing something, I'll make a mistake, and I'll be like, oh, LaShawn, that was marvelous. Now you know how to not do that. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, are you kidding me? He's like, you give yourself the craziest pats on the back. But it's like, I have to continue loving me. Yeah. And people don't realize that if you are constantly saying to yourself, that's dumb, that's stupid, I'm a moron, that gets into your psyche.
Oh, yeah.
And you begin to, manifest things based off of those thoughts. Our thoughts. Oh, people just still in this day and age, they don't realize how powerful our thoughts are and how they drive our life and everything that we're manifesting into our lives. And so I was like, even if I make a mistake, I don't look at it as a mistake. It's a learning lesson. So, hey, that was brilliant, LaShawn. Oh, look what you figured out. Hey, that burns when you don't, when you turn the oven up too high. Look what I did, And, even though it's silly, for other people to hear, and it's silly for me as well, but I look at the beauty, and I'm always looking for the beauty in everything. And I remember hearing years ago, I'm going to assume this was a true story. I don't know if it was or not, but it was about Albert Einstein. And they said that there was this factory that he had, and all of his materials were in there, and all of his equations, and everything that he needed. And somehow something happened, and his factory burned down to the ground. And as it was burning down, he told his son, go get your mother. She needs to see this. And so he goes and gets his mother. And of course, the son and his wife are like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is the worst thing that could have ever happened to you. And he said, no, this is actually great. And they're like, what? And his response to that was, I'm wiping away all of my mistakes. And I was like, and I remember reading the story, like, I'd be pissed, like, oh my gosh, like, how do you respond to something like that? But it's possible. And so everything is, life is truly, about our perspective.
Yep.
The way that we choose to look at any situation. We can just look and say, hey, this is the worst thing ever. Or we can look at it and say, okay, this is a very painful, trying time in my life. But what can I learn from this? What's the beauty, in all of this? Because so many times where we're so focused on the materialistic things, and that's, even more so, as time goes on, it's just more material. But in order for you to do the inner work, sometimes you have to pull away from all the materialistic stuff. Sometimes you have to lose the materialistic stuff, unfortunately, for you to really decide to go inside and look at yourself and focus on what's really, important in life.
And be honest about it. Yeah, be very honest about it. Because, it's easy to get caught up in I need the money, I need to do this, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and this is what's important. But then, we're creating that narrative.
Yeah, we are. We most certainly are. We definitely create the narrative. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm against, nice things. I love nice things and large homes and beautiful cars, just like everybody else. But what's most important to me is the things that I came here to teach and the people that I came here to help and to love. Those are the things that are most important to me. And I love traveling. Traveling is, a passion of mine. But, those are the most important things. There were some friends at my home about a week or so ago. And I remember having this conversation and sharing with them. I said, right now I could lose everything that I have physically. And I said, the only thing that would really mean something to me are the pictures that I have of, my family and my mom, because both of my parents have transitioned, the pictures that I have of them. And there's one pair, and there's actually a few things that my mother gave me, but my mother had dementia. And before she really took a turn and declined, in her mental faculty, for my birthday, the last birthday gift I ever got from her was a pair of Pittsburgh Steelers pajamas, because I'm a huge Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And I remember my sister telling me, we were out and about, and she said, I have to get that for Sean for her birthday. I want to get that for her birthday. And so that was the last gift that I've ever gotten from my mom. So I could lose everything. Those pajamas mean something to me. Anybody touches my pajamas, I will hurt you. And my fiance picks on me. He's like, I'm going to destroy all your Steelers stuff. I'm like, whoa. You're crossing the line,
That's
dude.
The border.
Yeah, it's just like, some of the other T-shirts and stuff that I have, I don't even know where they came from. You can play around with those. You touch the pajamas, I'm going to have to hurt you. It's just like, back away. But yeah, and it's just knowing the things that really have value in our lives.
Yeah, because I believe when we come here to have this experience, because we can't do it when we're in spirit, and we have to go through these hardships to learn these lessons and integrate them into who we are in the fabric of our being. And we take those lessons and that integration with us when we die. We don't take any of the physical stuff,
right? And
we keep all the sentimental. But as long as you're living and you're doing and you're integrating these lessons into who you are, and you're actually learning and be honest about it, as long as you can be at peace when and maybe we don't know when we're going to leave, but as long as you're living every day, I think Steve Jobs said it, as if it were your last, then I think you're good. As long as you keep that kind of mindset, I'm here to do something, and I'm going to make sure this thing in my heart is leading the brigade, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And I like that quote, but I also like the idea of living each day as if you want also to have a very blessed tomorrow, and inspired tomorrow, and I totally get, where he was going, with that. But, I think sometimes that, just moving on, and looking, because, when I think about if today was my last day, how would I feel about the things that I did today? And what does that look like for me? And so always trying to remember that, especially when things don't feel right and I'm kind of off, but just reminding myself that, go forward, do your best today, whatever the best Monday looks like, and tomorrow's Tuesday, whatever the best Tuesday looks like. What does that look like for you? And make that day happen.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to time, but I guess if you have any kind of lesson or just like whatever you want to channel, and like the last like kind of closing statement on what you want to share with the listeners, and just about, it sounds like we're learning to know ourselves, and once we know ourselves, then we'll have our boundaries, and we'll be able to have the relationships we've always wanted with whoever it is.
Right. Right. And I do want to say this really quickly too, because I want to let people know about this. Based off the book, I Am Not an Option, I am doing a workshop series. You can go to IamNotAnOption.com. And you can find out about it there. And you can also go to my website, which is LaShawnMcCrary.com. Hopefully you guys will put up a graphic or something, because it's really complicated to spell my last name. But it's a 5-week course. It is really great. There's an early bird special going on right now where you can get a 15% discount. This is going to be a really, really awesome time. It's just going to be great. So for anyone, if anything that I've said here, tonight, if it touched you in any way, make sure that you're a part of this workshop. It's limited because of the spacing, so I can only bring 30 people in on this workshop. So if you're interested, make sure you take advantage of that. And the last thing is, I am also doing a wonderful YouTube series called my White Towel video series. So if you just type in white towel messages, you will see me in a white towel, and I'm not going to tell you anymore. But make sure you watch the intro video. You got to watch the intro video because it explains why I did everything the way that I did, and I think you guys will really enjoy that. And it touches a lot on some of the themes in the book as well. So everyone, make sure you do that. But in closing, wow, what would I like to share with you guys? Life is short, and get out there. Whatever your dreams are, whatever is in your heart, whatever you're supposed to be doing, but you've been talking yourself out of doing, go do that thing. And don't just read about it. It's good. We need to do research about certain things, but sometimes we can also get stuck in a pattern of just learning, how to write a book. You write a book by sitting down and writing. Mm-hmm. And don't try to figure out all the chapter titles. Don't try to figure it all out at once. All the pieces of the puzzle will come into play. You don't have to have the jacket already designed, and you don't have to have the title. Again, when I sat down and wrote this book that I am very proud of, that is truly my baby, again, I wasn't planning on writing a book at that time, and it just came out. The words came out first. Eventually, the chapter titles came about. My editor came along, and she flipped everything around, so the fronts and the back and the middles and the beginning, and everything. But it was a great process, and so I just encourage all of you, to do that, and to make sure that you are listening to your higher self, whatever your spiritual practices are. I do prayer and meditation, a lot of meditation, whatever it takes for you to get into that space to be your best self. Do it, and do it as often as you can. And I just really implore you to get out there, because your gifts aren't for you, they're for other people. So get out there and share them. If you're an intuitive, share your intuitive gifts. If you're a writer, write. If you're an actor, act. Whatever it is that you do, I just really want you, especially the people in the non-traditional fields. Yeah. The other ones, doctor, lawyer, that roadmap has been so painted for such a long time. Those are easier, to follow into. But the non-traditional paths, where you really don't have a clue how to get in them, there's an old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I know that from my own personal experiences. So when you are really ready to do it, and you decide that you're going to make that step, doors are going to begin to open. A window's going to crack. Something is going to happen where you know that you're on the right path, and just keep going. Know that I love you. I believe in you. I'm here for you. If you need my coaching services, again, go to my website. Maybe I can help you out. Find somebody, even if it's not me, find somebody that can encourage you, but that's going to push you. Nobody can do it for you. It's your job. Do it yourself. But go out there, because you can definitely do it. It's why you came here to do.
Yeah.
Great message.
Go all chips in.
All
sounds
in.
like.
All in. That's right. Like a poker game. Go all in. All the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and see what happens.
And
Because
see-
usually things.
Yeah, and it's going to happen. And you're going to love it. That's the thing. You know, after I finished the book, I loved it. You know, as I'm preparing for the workshop, I'm already loving it. You know, I'm already setting the intentions for it. You know, with everything that you do, you know, do it with the excitement and the passion.
That made me think of a question. So
Go for it.
Is it because you didn't have any idea how any of this was going to happen beforehand? You didn't have the map. You didn't have any of that. Did that make it that much more amazing? Or
wow, that's a great question.
did you live it fully because of that?
I think I just simply lived it fully because it's one of the messages that I was sent here to bring. I really do. I don't even think all that other stuff, because that other stuff didn't even equate in my mind at that time. You know what I mean? Those things were such a non-issue, a non-factor. It was just, I have to get this message out to women, and I'm going to do it in a book. And that was all I knew. Yeah, that was it. That was it. Yeah, it was just that simple, you know, to just get it out there. Yeah.
Don't overcomplicate things, guys.
Yeah, don't do that. And I know that's so easy. That it's so easy to overcomplicate things and the question and to doubt. But when you feel the momentum, and that's the thing, don't kill the momentum. Write it. You know, I would be sitting down writing and somebody go, "What are you writing a book?" And I'd be like, "Yep." and I kept writing, because I was. Yeah. What's it called? I don't know yet. But I'm writing a book. Yeah, I am. And that's what I did. And it was funny because sometime later, because it was pretty much a 9-month process. So when it was done, I was like, "Oh crap, she really did." Yeah, I really did. I told you I was. Yeah, that's what you think I was doing. I said I was writing a book, you know, and just go for it, you know. Yeah, get it done. Put your heart out there.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
This was fantastic.
This is
I
awesome.
feel motivated myself.
Good, great.
You know,
I feel like I just read a whole help book.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Thank you.
Cool beans. Well, I guess Free Mind. Do we have anything else to say? We did your stuff, right? You got your website.
Yeah, we'll link it all in the video and the podcast too.
Awesome.
We'll post all the links. If you're interested in the workshop and you feel attracted to it, you feel like it resonates with you, I would jump on it. Just do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just do it. Oh, and you know what? And I do want to throw something in there real quick, because a lot of people wonder, well, is this for single women? Is this for married? Is this for, who is this for? And so as I have on my eyes have gotten bad over the years. But for single women, to help them define themselves before they actually get into a relationship, make sure that they're in a really, really good space. And I talk about that in the book. I don't want to give too much away about the book, but I did all of that work on myself before I got the relationship, which is now 30 days away from marriage. So I want to throw that out there. Women who are dating and engaged, to accept the truth about their current relationship and decide if they should move forward. Okay. And also women who are married, and acknowledge where they are in their relationship. You know, are they overgiving? Are they losing themselves, which is very common for a lot of women, and figure out what their next best move is so that they can actually get themselves back. And so all of those will be incorporated in this workshop. And I know it may seem like, how do you touch all of those, you know, at the same time? Well, again, it's about doing the self work.
Right. And
through doing your self work, you figure out what's important for you.
And the dates?
The dates for this are April. They start off April 30th. Again, these are going to be, and that says Thursdays. That should say Tuesdays. Tuesdays, April 30th, May 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th. So it is actually Tuesdays in April and May.
In Atlanta.
In Atlanta, okay. Yes, in Atlanta. Yeah, and the address and all of that is on there. But it's at Energy Yoga, which is on Cheshire Bridge Road in Atlanta. So, yes.
And we'll also be at the upcoming Psychic Fair.
Yes. Well, actually, I will. No, I will miss that one because I will be in Italy getting married. So, yes. So, the following month, I should be there for that one in May. Yes.
Okay, cool. That's also at Energy Yoga Studio.
Yes.
So, cool. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you'll have a super fantastic day, and get a lot of momentum from this. Ride that wave.
Absolutely.
Free minds out. Toodles.